Hello and welcome to Minivangelism, the driver's seat, where we talk about the Bible and faith without the kids in the car. If the kids are in the car, go listen to one of our other Advent Adventure episodes. This one's just for the parents. Parents, during Advent, we welcome you once again to Dark Advent, where we are exploring some of the original or traditional themes that the church has explored in Advent. Specifically, the four last things which are death, judgment, heaven, and hell. And this is Hell Week. We're having a lot of fun. And there's nothing more Christian, I think, than talking about hell and laughing.
Yeah. It's the tonal shift of the morning for me because I literally just came from preschool chapel.
We wished you a Merry Christmas.
So let's talk about hell.
Yeah. I'm about this life.
Which is what preschool chapel was about today, actually. It was the fires of hell. Mm-hmm.
That's good.
That's what we talked about.
That was your preschool. I have, just as a little bit of proof of concept here, I noticed how many Christmas carols actually do talk about hell.
Oh, yeah.
And one of them is actually one of the oldest Christmas carols ever. It dates back to the 4th century, before Christmas was really even celebrated as Christmas, or Advent even started.
4th century? This is like pre-Dark Advent even.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is Let All Mortal Flesh Keep Silent. And in it, we get the line, rank on rank, the host of heaven spreads its vanguard on the way as the light of light descendeth from the realms of endless day. Comes the powers of hell to vanquish as the darkness clears away. Alleluia, 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 Lord Most High. So, it's been for a long time that we've said part of the good news about Jesus' arrival at Christmas or arrival in the second coming is what Jesus has to do with hell.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you're a music nerd.
I am.
When did we stop talking about hell and start talking about figgy pudding in Christmas songs?
Somewhere in Victorian England, I imagine. Yeah, I don't know. I think we got out of Dark Advent probably around the Reformation. Anything that smacked of being too Catholic kind of got put aside. But like Lutheran Christmas carols, and other Protestant, like God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen, Let Nothing You Dismay, Remember Christ Our Savior was born on Christmas Day to save us all from Satan's power. Yeah. When we were gone astray. I mean, there's an aspect of that that's still been a part of the tradition. I think I learned everything on the 19th century, where the 19th century Christianity in America just kind of went too hard, with judgment and hell, and especially post 1965, we've wanted to be nice.
Right. Well, the 19th century is when Santa Claus was kind of like a.
Yeah.
Twas the Night Before Christmas.
Yes.
Or Visit from St. Nick is the name of the poem. It was like 1830 something.
Yeah. And if you want to get into like sociology, it's interesting how like post 60s, we started getting more of our cues from corporate America. And so Santa Claus is a Coca-Cola invention. And
well, he's not.
Yes, he is. He is a Coca-Cola invention. And that's where we get corporate or commercial Christmas from, and I'm here for it.
Let's reiterate, please. We really hope you're listening to this without the kids in the car.
Yes. Well, I mean, yeah, without the kids in the car. Oh, you mean because of Santa? I thought you were going to say people in Atlanta might be listening, so I shouldn't throw shade at Coke.
That's fine.
The legend of Santa has been different in every generation.
Yes,
and remains true.
And so the Santa that we have is Coca-Cola Santa.
Right. The story there is that Coke saw like St. Nicholas and Father Christmas and probably some Norse stuff and kind of put it all with a bow in a big fluffy red suit and called it Santa Claus.
I'm just imagining Mountain Dew Santa has like a camo hat, no shirt.
Looks like one of the Duck Dynasty guys.
Yes.
I like my Santa. With a tin of dip in his lip. And, yeah, I can get down with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mountain Dew Santa.
Mountain Dew
Sponsored
Santa.
by Zen.
All right, so we are not here to comment on the relative merits of Legends of Santa Claus.
From Santa to Satan.
That's
Let's go.
All you have to do is flip 2 letters. So what version of hell did you inherit from your childhood or from your Christian formation to this date?
I like how you just like post it up like you're ready.
That's right.
Because you're like, I already know where it's going. Hell was the place where sinners went when they died.
Yeah.
And it was a big old cave and lots of fire, and torment and torture. And it's just the worst. It's like what we think hell is. It's just big old fire. There's a lake of fire, but then there's like other fire, but you're just on fire all the time and it hurts.
Yeah.
And it's dark.
And how long does it last?
Forever. Hell is eternal. I went to my youth group went on a field trip to a hell house when I was in 8th grade.
Naturally.
Did you ever go to a hell house?
No, I've only seen them in videos that make fun of them.
So the hell house was, for those of you that do not know what a hell house or a judgment house is, what it was is like it was at a church, and you would start like in this dark room, and these like demons would come out and like scare you, and they're like, we're taking you on a journey through hell. And then you'd like go to these different rooms, and all of these people were like dying, but like sin dying. Like there was somebody was like struggling with their sexuality and they killed themselves,
sex, drugs, and rock
or
and roll.
like someone died on an abortion table, or like we went outside for the drunk driving accident. And then like you would go to the funeral of the person, and then they would like take you to this room, and they were like screaming at you and scared. It was a haunted house. That's what it was. It was a haunted house. And then they would push you in these big coffins and shut the door, and then like bang on the walls for a minute. And then the other side of the door would open, and you would be in hell. And it was like it was the youth room, but it was like, like orange and yellow lights, and like all the people that you watch die are like on the ground, and they're like being tortured, and like Satan's standing there, and he's like, ah, and then like all of a sudden the door burst open, and like Jesus comes in, and he's like, come with me, and then he like brings you into a room where there are people sitting at tables waiting for you to get saved.
Wow.
That was Hell House. That's the hell I inherited.
And instead we have Trunk or Treat.
Yes. Which isn't as metal.
No.
So I'm just saying, next year I'm going to talk to the youth pastor here and see if he can do this. But yeah, so it was just torment and torture and fire.
Yeah.
That's that. And it's eternal. Like you get one shot on earth in your life, and you have a choice, and you make that choice. And if you don't make the right one, hell is where you go.
Yeah.
And ain't no getting out of it.
Yeah. It's interesting, like, sociology has done some studies on, like, there's sociology of youth ministry. And, like, that in a nutshell is, like, what we thought youth ministry was for in the 90s. Was to, like, scare kids straight. And make sure that they don't. I mean, notice that the sins that are named there, it's not greed or exploitation or any of those things. It's the things that teenagers do. You know, it's like drinking, cussing.
Okay, I will say
up.
there was one person that was like a church worker, and like did like all of these things for the church, and like they like did all of this stuff, but like they didn't have like a relationship with Christ or something like that. And so it was just like, it was like works without faith.
Yeah. I remember, have you ever received a religious tract? Have you ever handed them out?
No, I never handed out religious tracts. I didn't go to that kind of church.
Close, but I received a religious tract once that was the setting of the story, this comic strip, was this couple that was going to be missionaries in some foreign country, and they got quizzed or they had like the person next to them on the plane was like, why are you going? And they were like, well, to build wells and feed hungry children and stuff like that. And the person said, well, aren't you going to tell them about Jesus and make sure that they're saved? And they were like, yeah, we'll talk about Jesus, but like primarily we just want to love them. And then the plane crashes and the missionary couple is thrown into hell because apparently it's not good enough to just love your neighbor if you're not actively trying to convert them. And the little Batman speech bubble, when they were thrown into hell, they both said, "Yup." I was like, I guess that's what that sounds like.
Did Dr. Seuss write this religion?
Exactly. Exactly. So I do think any kind of doctrine or understanding of hell, there's a lot of history there. Mm-hmm. And some of it I would say is problematic. Mm-hmm. But I wonder, like, do you have a sense for what the Bible actually says about hell?
No. I do now because I researched it, because once again you are like quizzing me on this stuff. So I've started looking at it. I mean, some of the imagery is not unfounded. This whole idea of like flames and fire and all that stuff, like it's in the Bible. But this whole idea of like Satan sitting on his throne and like, you know, relishing like everybody, you know, just like sitting there and like basically directing the torment or whatever is not there. So,
do you have a sense for whether, well, I'll save that question. We have talked before, some on the podcast, definitely a lot in person, about what the Bible actually says and like how the idea of hell or the image of hell evolves through scripture and through time.
Yeah.
And we've talked before about some of the different terms that get translated as hell. Mm-hmm. Are there any of those that you remember that you can help us review?
Yeah. So Hades is one of them, which is coming from obviously the Greek god of the underworld. And you know, a lot of people believed that was where, when you died, you went to the underworld.
And if you want to get on Anna's nerves, you refer to Hades as a place and not a person. And she'll say, yeah, wait, nope, not.
Sit down. We're going to learn some Greek today.
Exactly.
There's also, this is not something that we've talked about on the podcast, but I was doing some research on Gehenna.
Yeah.
Which is in the Bible. And it was like a real place outside of Jerusalem, which is like where they went and burned the trash. Like that was just where you sent all the like refuge and waste and all that, or refuse, not refuge, refuse and waste, and burned it.
Yeah, and that example actually comes from the words of Jesus, that of things being cast into Gehenna, where the worm never stops eating and the flames never die.
Yeah.
And that has been lifted up as a description of hell, but the critique of that is actually, no, he's just talking about a trash heap that actually existed where people burn trash.
Yeah.
And so it's hyperbolic metaphorical language that's kind of like saying, I'm going to take you to Mount Trashmore. You know what Mount Trashmore is?
No.
It's in Virginia Beach. It's awesome.
I'm sorry, Charles, what?
Mount Trashmore is a former landfill that has now, they've planted grass seed on the top, and it's a random mountain in the middle of the Tidewater, Virginia. And it's a great place to go sledding. It's the closest thing to like a contemporary analogy that I could come up with.
Your state, man.
Anybody that knows Virginia Beach or Norfolk will know what I'm talking about. And they'll also appreciate that I just said Norfolk.
I was about to say, I don't know what.
But Gehenna is a trash heap. And so
that's Jesus, on fire.
Right. And so that's one way of explaining away the idea of a place of eternal conscious torment. And I think that phrase, eternal conscious torment, has become a place of debate. And that phrase has been used particularly recently around the discussion of limited salvation versus universal salvation. Clearly there's a bad place that people keep referring to in the Bible, but is it actually a place? And is it actually a place where you experience eternal conscious torment?
Right.
Because in other parts of the Bible, after death places are not like that at all.
Yeah, like Sheol.
Right. What's Sheol?
Sheol is the Jewish underworld. It's where you go after you die. It's just the place of where you're kind of like asleep, and you're there. And that's kind of ancient ideas of an afterlife. Like the earliest ideas of an afterlife are all just, it's nothing. It's like your soul is just asleep and you're just drifting.
It's just nothing.
Right. And it wasn't until a little bit later. I mean, we're still talking like, 12,000 BC or something like, you know what I mean? Like it's, but it wasn't until later. And it was actually when like royalty and stuff were starting to be established that this idea of like a tiered afterlife came about, where people are given good things or bad things. You know what I mean? Like the Egyptians would bury people with items to take with them because there wasn't anything for them in the afterlife. So they would have to have like food and money and
for them
like
to
that.
Enjoy or for them to pay.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only tweak to that description of Sheol is that there is a Jewish afterlife other than nothing. So it's within Jewish thought that before Christ that there becomes this debate about the resurrection of the dead, and so that's why Jesus gets pinned by some scholars to say, like, who are you with? Are you with the people that say there's a resurrection, or are you with the people that say there isn't? And that's when he says, "I am the resurrection." So in answer to your question, I am he. So within Jewish life, within Islam, within Christianity, afterlife affairs through history become a thing that we talk about. And part of what's tricky is as soon as you talk about anything good after death, you start trying to figure out, okay, who gets that and who doesn't.
Yeah.
And so that you start to get this kind of bifurcated or binary eternity in which there's a good place and there's a bad place.
Right.
And don't get me wrong, there are scriptures that suggest that there's a bad place and it lasts forever. But my take on this is, if you want to make an argument for an eternal conscious tormenting hell, you can find it. But in my experience, the people who are trying to make that argument are never putting themselves there. It's always a place for someone else.
Yeah.
And I think that is a problem.
I don't know. 'Cause like and maybe it's just because I'm not, you referred to me in the last episode as a normal person, and maybe I'm not a normal person after all, because this idea of a hell that's real easy to get into, like I put myself there all the time. And whenever I would come across those passages, like in Thessalonians, where Paul like is pretty blunt about it, and Revelation, where they talk about, people being cast into the fire and all this stuff, like it was just one of those reminders of, oh yeah, I could easily end up on that side. So I need to walk the straight and narrow, and I need to make sure that I'm doing the right things.
Yeah.
Because it's not just Jesus. Like we've talked before about, like when I've mentioned like Jesus mentioning all these things, and you're like, well, yeah, but Jesus is showing like, this is what it could be, but here I am to save you from it. But then like post Jesus, we're still talking about it. And so that's why I'm,
right.
scared straight.
Yeah.
It worked. The Hell House worked.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, part of my take on that is, part of what we talked about before, that doesn't make sense. And the church has defended against this. It doesn't make sense to think that Jesus was gracious once, but that was our one chance.
Right.
And ultimately Jesus is not gracious. That doesn't seem to be consistent with who we have encountered in Jesus.
Right.
That you get a get out of hell free card as long as you say the right words. But if you can't say those right words, you're screwed.
Yeah.
or that Jesus who comes in judgment is going to be a different kind of Jesus. I think that's my biggest issue with anything that suggests that that after Jesus is different. Generally, the church has said no, he was and is to come. I think the other thing that where the Bible can kind of contradict some of those thoughts is, okay, so if hell is this place of fire, what kind of fire is it?
Right.
Is it the fire of punishment, or is it the fire of refinement? Because casting something into the fire is how you make glass works.
Right.
It's how you make silver. It's how you make gold.
Yeah.
And so, and in the ancient world, people are very much aware of that. Like, that's usually how fire is used, to cook something or to make something, not to destroy something. And so, I think that's another but from Scripture. I think the other argument that's made by this guy named David Bentley Hart in his book that's kind of about universal salvation is the problem with eternal conscious torment is I don't think people actually take seriously what eternity means.
Right.
To be eternally punished for something you did in a mortal life is not justice.
Right.
They're really, even if you think of unspeakable things, eternal punishment far outweighs, if it is eternal, far outweighs the harm that you have done.
Yeah.
And so, do we really think that that's what God is like?
Right.
That God would pronounce an eternal punishment for a temporal sin.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of what it comes down to is, what do you really think God is like?
So I started kind of questioning this idea of it's black and white.
Right.
Like either you're
Or
saved or you're
binary.
not. You're going to hell or heaven. Like
Right.
that's it. I think the first time it really got thrown in my face was I was teaching at this private school, and I did a play. I directed a play that was about children in the Holocaust. And it, like basically like only one made it out, and it was based on a true story, like these letters that these kids had written, and like periodically throughout, like they would get called to the train to be taken to Auschwitz and all this stuff. And the show went really well, and after the show closed, I was in the office and I was like counting up our ticket money, and one of the coaches from this school, it's a Christian school, and one of the coaches came in and he was like, that show sure was powerful, and I brought my granddaughter and she was real into it, and we had a good discussion on the way home where she was like, Pawpaw, like, why were they being killed? And I told him it was because they were Jewish. And, she was like asking me like, Pawpaw, what happened to her? And I said, well, they didn't know Jesus, so they all ended up going to hell. And I just like stopped and I looked at him and I was like, what the F is your problem? Like, I just said like just word vomited out of me. And I was like, no, you didn't. And he was like, well, yeah, I mean, they weren't Christian. Like they all ended up in hell. And I was like, I don't think that Jesus would let children, or God would let Jewish children
Right.
just go to hell because they were in a concentration camp. You know what I mean? Like that's
Right.
okay. You got a much, much different message from this play
Right.
than what was intended. And like, it was just like the matter of fact way that he said it. And he was like, well, I mean, it just is what it is. And I was like, no, it's not. And so like, that's when I was like, oh wait, I profess to serve a merciful God, yet that's not what mercy looks like. And then it was just another thing that kind of started my, like, I don't like to use the word deconstruction, but my faith renovation, if you will.
Yeah. And, but, so, and, I won't say but, because everything before the but is bullshit. But, and, where is the hell in that story?
The hell is the kids being gassed in a chamber.
Right.
Being subjected to starvation and, beatings and
Right.
and disease and things like that.
And when they were welcomed into heaven, who welcomed them?
Jesus.
Yes. That's the best thing that the church has to say about hell. Is that, of course it's a real place, and you don't have to be dead to go there. We know it. We've seen it. We experience it. And it's not always fiery. Sometimes it's the coldness of the world that utterly disregards you and treats you as if you are nothing. And we experience it all the time in small ways and globally in large ways. It's not just heaven that's a place on earth, but also hell.
Ooh, hell is a place on earth.
And what we say about Jesus is Jesus is the one that rescues us from hell, in this life or the next. And that's why in the iconography of the church, I don't know if I've talked about this, but I talk about it all the time. The icons of Easter are the early Greek icons of Easter are always Jesus being raised from the dead, reaching his hands down and pulling up usually Adam and Eve out of death, out of hell. And often with a little image of somebody who's supposed to be Satan, who is now chained up.
Yeah.
So I think the most universally consistent thing we say about hell is that it's the place that Jesus springs us from. And that's the good news for children lost in Holocaust. I think it's also the good news for all the outcast and downtrodden of the world is that in this life or the next, Jesus intends to get you out of there.
Right.
And he's not a liar. He's going to do it.
Yeah.
I don't think I understand the psychological necessity of the kind of hell that was a part of that coach's worldview.
Right.
I don't think I understand how that goes unquestioned in people's lives for so long. And to the point where they just say it is what it is. I can't control it. I wish it were different, but this is what's in the Bible and I can't believe anything else. Yeah. I have to imagine that at some level they're getting something out of that. Even if it's just the assurance that I'm going to the good place, and I'm only going to go to the good place if people are also going to the bad place.
Yeah. I think it's kind of like a, almost like a sunk cost fallacy.
Sure.
Where it's like, the more you put into something, even if it's not working, it's like, well, I've already invested this much time, so it has to work.
Yeah.
I think that if you come from a tradition where you are not saved, your salvation is not found in Christ's mercy for you. Your salvation is not found in God's love for you. Your salvation is not found in Jesus, but your salvation is a get out of hell free card.
Right.
Like you were scared into salvation and not loved into it. I think that's where that thinking comes from.
Sure.
Of I got saved because I didn't want to go to hell, and I have to do everything that I can to make sure that I stay out of hell. And I'm going to live my life in a way I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to, have sex before marriage. I'm not going to do all of these other things, murder, steal, whatever. But I'm going to live my life set apart to stay out of hell. And then when I see people that aren't doing that aren't putting in the work, that aren't making the sacrifices that I have to make, they're going to hell because I've done all this work to get into heaven. You know what I mean? Instead of just like letting Jesus love me.
Right. Yeah. And so I think that's part of how it really closely relates to a basic assumption of works righteousness that I played by the rules, and it's not fair if other people get in and they didn't play by the rules.
Yeah, they got to go have all the fun.
Right. I think that's insightful. So if it's not that, what is it? If you're walking into a faith that's not running from hell, what are you doing instead?
I'm walking into a faith that's running into heaven.
Yeah. But you're not being chased. You know, I think that's the difference. And I think that's everything. But I also think that that's like, there's part of that requires prior assumptions that even go back to like good girl, bad girl childhood formation that have to be broken open.
Yeah.
The rule follower has to see that my salvation is not just in my following the rules. And the rule breaker has to see that actually some rules are good for me and for my neighbor.
Yeah.
You know, there has to be something that's broken in order to grow into not running from something, but running to something.
Well, and I think it's, you know, we talked last week about making heaven. Heaven is what God intended us to have, right? It's the life that God intended for us. It's the earth that God intended for us. It's all of these things that God intended. And so if I'm going into a faith that is not based on being scared of hell, I follow the rules because they make this place a little bit more like heaven. There are natural consequences to sin, and they're not like necessarily punishments from God. They're just natural consequences. Right. And a lot of those are the law of the land that the government says. If I steal something, I'm going to jail.
But
right?
a lot of those are also like broken relationships.
Yes.
Yeah. And
hurting other people. And you're hurting God's people. You're hurting the same people that he died for, right? Like he died for me, but he died for you. And so if I wrong you, right?
Right.
And so I'm hurting one of God's people. And so, yeah, it's just, it's making our world a little bit less like hell and a little bit more like heaven.
And it applies even to biblical, fortune cookie lines, like the wages of sin is death. That is either, if you sin, God repays you with death, or if you so sin, all you're going to get from it is death.
Yeah.
Of just like a fact of the orientation of the world, that sin is the stuff that leads to death. And it's not, and that is exactly what God is trying to reverse.
Right.
Is trying to make the way of sin ultimately a way that God pulls us into life and not death. And it becomes the life that really is life.
Yeah.
And I think part of what I love about it is how much more that leads to joy in my own life. I think the little voice in the back of my head is you just like it because it sounds better. But I actually think it's more consistent with who God is in the Bible. One of the primary images in the Bible for this whole conversation is the story of the flood. That's a story in which very few people are saved, and everybody else dies. And the people who are saved are the ones who are supposed to be the righteous ones. And then Jesus shows up, and he is not hanging out on the ark. He is swimming in the water. He gets baptized into the very water that is where the lost souls were lost.
Right.
And he's sitting down to dinner with them, and he's feeding them miraculous bread, and he's washing their feet, and he's letting them wash his feet. He has not come for the righteous; he has come for the lost. And that is what Peter ultimately says in one of the letters of Peter that Jesus was up to during the 3 days between his crucifixion and resurrection, is that he went and preached to the lost souls who were lost in the flood, in order to bring them up to heaven with him. Which, by the way, ends up not being a place in the sky. When he's raised, he's not raised to the clouds. He's raised to earth, where he is with other people.
Yeah.
And so generally, Jesus is not only bringing heaven to earth, he's also bringing heaven up from the grave. I mean, hell up from the grave, and saying, I want to be with all of you. And I have come to squeeze everyone lost in the flood into the ark. It just happens to be the ark of my own body.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that that's key. And like that particular text, you could accuse it of being like a proof text. But especially in the early church, it was a vital aspect of what they how they understood Jesus.
Yeah.
That he was the one who came not just to prove that the righteous are right, but to redeem sinners, and even dead sinners. And so the image of hell, especially in the early church and consistently throughout, but the church has this debate. The image of hell is of a hell that's been harrowed or even hallowed by Jesus. So the harrowing of hell is actually at the heart of a lot of early Easter sermons. That when Jesus comes on a white horse, he comes to F up hell. Like he's the righteous warrior that comes to burst through the gates of hell. That's why like Paul keeps getting busted out of prison. Like this is the shape of the gospel, is the liberation of sinners into new life in Christ.
Yeah.
It's also why, just stop me or edit me. In church architecture, the main hall that we usually call a sanctuary, the old name for it is the nave, which has the same root of navy or like naval ship. Mm-hmm. And it's constructed with these big arches to look like the hull of a ship as the ark. And Jesus is understood to be the ark.
Yeah.
And his work has been to incorporate all of creation into his own body.
Yeah.
So that even those who were not saved on the ark might be saved in his own body. Mm-hmm. Generally, all of these images are of a Jesus who comes not to ultimately be the divine sorting hat, mm-hmm. But to be the divine rescuer. And so when people ask me if I believe in hell, absolutely I do. Mm-hmm. It just ain't the place it used to be.
Right.
Because, and then you get a few different images here, either because Jesus came and F'd that place up.
Yeah.
The locks on the door don't work anymore. He's broken the locks.
Yeah.
Or if hell is a place, it's a place that's locked from the inside. Mm. And if anybody goes to hell, it's because they want nothing to do with this redeeming Jesus.
Right.
That's where I think that's a moving image. And I also think if you've really known Jesus, there's no way you're not going to fall in love with him.
Right.
And I think Jesus has the power ultimately to even bend our will against what we think is best for us, so that he gets his way.
Yeah.
The big question about whether anybody goes to hell is, does Jesus get what he wants in the end?
Right.
And the Jesus I know gets what he wants. And the thing of it is, apparently he wants me.
Yeah.
Like that's the shocking good news. That Jesus has stormed the hell of my own life and my own heart, and demanded that I come with him.
Yeah. So you just made a lot of really good points, but I just have a lot of questions.
Good.
Which is what happens every time we talk about this.
I probably talked too much. So I hope you can get to all your questions. I'm here for it.
So first of all, I'm just imagining, because you're talking about like he was pulling them up, but not really up. When we talked about in the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, right? How there's like two places, mm-hmm. and there's like the paradise side where Lazarus is, and then there's the side of eternal conscious torment right on the other side, and then there's the chasm in the middle. I'm imagining instead of like bringing people like up a hill, like leaving hell, like him just like throwing a big plank over the chasm and being
Yes.
like, let's go, come on, come on, come on, come on. Like,
Right.
and everybody just like going across the chasm.
Right.
And he's leading them on his horse.
Yes. Jesus is Jacob's ladder.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then we talked we talked in the last episode, or maybe it was the judgment episode, about the Easter play at my church.
Yeah.
It was epic. And the resurrection scene was spoilers if you want to see it. Jesus does die, but he comes back. And then like there was like the tomb was there, and then like Satan was like walking around, and he's like, and there are like demons in the sky, and they're like, everybody's like all creepy. And then we had fireworks go off in the church, and the stone rolled away, and then like angels come down, and they're fighting the demons in the air, and then Jesus comes out, and he like throws Satan on the ground, and he like snatches the keys off his belt.
Nice.
And he like stands over him and holds the keys up.
I'm here for that part of it.
And Satan's on the ground like throwing a tantrum while Jesus like stands on his back. But he never put the keys back in his pocket. He takes them with him.
Why you steal the keys is you're not going to unlock the door.
Exactly. He doesn't give them back. So he just like, he keeps the doors open. So yeah, I think the door's unlocked too. Because at least in the Easter play, he didn't turn around and like lock the gate behind him.
That's good. You get the harrowing of hell in that depiction.
Yeah.
You just don't get the rest of the story.
No, because then people end up going to hell at the end of the story. Yes. So I think like just as a not necessarily like a counter to the things that you said, but just help me understand.
Devil's advocate.
Yes, literally.
Yes.
Devil's advocate. I have always heard it that yes, pre-Jesus, those people got like a second chance. He went down there, he preached to them over those 3 days, he got them out, he threw the plank down, they walked across, they went to paradise, they're in heaven, all that stuff. But now that he has come, now that he has paid the sacrifice, now that we know, if we choose not to, then hell's open again, right?
Yeah.
That he didn't just like empty the place out. Like now it's kind of like it's on us because we are born in the AD part of time. Like it's a choice again, right? Like to go to hell.
And the church's argument against that is, what do you mean pre-Jesus, post-Jesus? There is one Jesus who was and is to come. Right.
But he didn't die on a cross until 33 AD.
That's right.
Ish, we think.
And
so everybody 32 AD and before is what I mean.
And like this gets a little philosophical, but part of what the church will say about the incarnation, death, and resurrection of Jesus is that it is an event in time, and it is the revelation of an eternal reality. So that's what Jesus means when he says, when you do it to the least of these, you do it to me. Mm-hmm. He is always the one who is suffering. He has always been the one present in the victims of the world. The crucifixion is not the one time that happened. This crucifixion is the one time that where we realize that when we do it to God. So Christ's life is in time. It is not of time. Mm-hmm. It is an eternal reality, which means that it's the chapter the page that gets turned in our history is not a page in the story of who God is. It's a page in the story of our understanding of God.
Right.
And so that's why it does not compute. It doesn't make sense to say pre-Jesus and post-Jesus, because who Jesus is on the cross and in resurrection is who Jesus always has been and always will be. So this door that opens, it reveals an eternally open door. And it's not a door that opens for a period of time or for what gets called a particular dispensation mm-hmm. and then gets shut for the next one. That doesn't compute with our theology about Jesus. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, that makes Jesus less than God or a puppet of God rather than God himself.
So I think the other thing that is just making me ponder a little bit, and We talked about it, and I think we're back now.
Okay.
2 words.
Mm-hmm.
Free will.
Yeah.
You said the door's locked on the inside,
Yeah.
right? What about the people who choose not to believe?
Right.
Who choose that they're not going to do it. Because God's grace is a gift. What if I don't want it?
Yeah. It's a C.S. Lewis image, this door being locked from the inside. Mm-hmm. And it assumes free will, or assumes at some level that God will accept our consent or non-consent to the offer that's on the table. My argument against free will is twofold. First of all, if our wills were free, we would choose good things. We don't, because our wills are bound by sin and death. And if Christ is the one who comes to break those specific bonds, it's Christ who comes in order to free our wills to choose the good, which is him. And so as long as we are not choosing him, our will is not yet free. But that starts in an argument to say, like, how free do you think your will really is? Mm-hmm. Or if it's too sensitive to think about your own lack of freedom to choose what you know is good for you, just think about your children. Yeah. I mean, the only thing that saves my children's life daily is my awareness that they're not in control of their own actions. They cannot help it. And because their wills are bound.
Right.
Because their wills are not their own. And they're certainly not God's full possession yet. Mm-hmm. That's why I bring them to church. So that the gospel can be like the acid in a MacGyver show that that degrades the lock that sin and death has around their heart, so that they can be freed for joyful obedience. Yeah. So the free will argument breaks down for me that I just don't think anybody in their right mind can say I'm a free person. What we do say is that in Christ I am becoming free.
Right.
I am becoming free to choose the good, to know and to choose the good that God has revealed in Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. That's what true freedom is. Freedom isn't actually just doing what you want or having the freedom to make your own choices. Mm-hmm. That leads to sin and death. Like history has proven that over and over. Real freedom comes when Jesus gets to use the key that he stole from Satan, mm-hmm. and unlock your heart. Now the second part of it is like this issue of consent, and that God's not going to force us to follow. And I think that holds some water. Mm-hmm. But I attribute that more to the fact that this God seems to be more interested in a relationship. And in a relationship, you don't force somebody to love you. Right. Like you can't tell somebody that they should trust you. You can only be trustworthy. And then people will trust you. And God seems to be like that. Mm-hmm. God seems to be more interested in a relationship. But I think the difference is that God is willing to do whatever it takes and take as long as it takes to prove God's own trustworthiness. And that's where eternity comes up again, because even if the door to hell locks from the inside and you choose to lock yourself in there because you want nothing to do with God, mm-hmm. Maybe God will just wait, or bring you your meals and slide them under that door, mm-hmm. And say, as long as it takes. But ultimately, the power of God's love, I believe, will convert all of creation. And I don't actually think our wills are that strong. Yeah. I don't actually think our resistance to the kind of love that we find in Jesus stands a chance. Yeah. So I still value consent. Mm-hmm. But I have big misgivings about free will, particularly any idea of free will that thinks it can ultimately resist the love of God.
Yeah. And
who are you?
Right. And Romans even says that, like,
Right.
nothing can separate us from the love of God. And even hell can't separate you from the love of God. And that's where I think that I've had like a big kind of like thought shift in what hell is, because I was taught and told like hell is eternal separation from God.
Right. I'm down with saying hell is separation from God. I'm just not down with saying it's eternal.
Yeah.
Because that separation is exactly the chasm over which God continues to throw a ladder.
Well, but it's also unbiblical. If we're saying that nothing can separate me from the love of God, and then in the same breath saying hell is eternal separation from God, that doesn't track.
Right.
That almost makes it sound like hell is stronger than God.
Right. Separation's not a good word there.
Yeah.
It can be resistance to God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like when our children resist what we are asking them to do, even if we know what's good for them, often the resistance leads to them getting hurt.
Yeah.
You know, like if I'm trying to carry my child up the stairs to bed and they're fighting me all the way, I'm probably not going to get hurt. They might, you know.
Yeah.
They're going to kick themselves out of my arms and hit their head on the floor. But what did that to them? In some sense, you can say my love, because my insistence that they do what's good for them resulted in them getting hurt. And so what the early church fathers will say about that is the fires of hell burn until you realize that they're intended to warm. Same fire, two different experiences of it. As long as you're resisting it, it burns. When you welcome it, it warms. And I think that's a way of narrating a way to have hell, but not have hell without Jesus.
Yeah. It makes me kind of think, and this is not biblical. I'm just going to go and say that right
That's
now.
all right.
But I was doing a little research in Sheol, and they almost talked about like, and I'm not a Jewish scholar, and I could be very wrong on what I'm just saying right now, but they talked about like there are different levels, almost like a long hallway, right? God's at one end of the hallway, and like where you are, kind of like once you enter, you kind of either start like at the far end of the hallway or the close end of the hallway. But eventually you can make your way. And like when Jesus threw the bridge down over the chasm, right? It was an opportunity for me to just, for us to get closer. I don't know why that image is kind of comforting to me.
Yeah. I think that is comforting. And the only thing I would tweak about the image is say that hallway is tilted toward God. So wherever you are, like the gravity of God is going to be pulling you in that direction.
Yeah.
That's it's not, God's love is not a neutral force.
Right.
It is a conquering force.
Yeah.
And that's the good news. Yeah.
So, okay, here's my big question for you though.
Good.
How do I, as a Christian, talk to someone about this concept of hell, about it, it's not an eternal separation from God. It's not eternal conscious torment. What do you say to those children that were killed in the Holocaust about the people that did that to them? What do you say to the sexual abuse survivor who was abused as a child and now their abuser is gone? How do you give that message to someone who is like, good, let them rot in hell? Right? You just need to rot in hell for the rest of for all of eternity. We talked last week in heaven about heaven as a coping mechanism. Hell is a coping mechanism if horrible shit has happened to you, right? And how do you make that, like, how do you offer comfort to someone that, is using hell to comfort them?
What do you think?
I'm asking you. You're not
playing. We've talked about this some.
Yeah, and I'm not playing that game with you. I want to hear what you have to say.
They will get what's coming to them.
For all of eternity?
It's not for me to say. I don't know. they will get what's coming to them. And that includes the fires of hell, which also happens to be the fire of God's love.
Okay. And if I say,
and I would try to stop talking. I would try to say very little and then listen.
and if I say, how would God love them? How could God love somebody that would do something like that?
I don't know. I don't know. And yet, God only knows.
Yeah. It's just hard.
Yeah.
Hell is a very comforting place
Yeah.
when you learn about injustice.
Right. Yeah. The things I'm not willing to do are take away the promise of justice. That's one thing. And the other is I'm not willing to give up hope for either the sinner or the sinned against. I don't think I'm permitted to give up on the hope of God's love. And if it's not justice, then it's not love.
Right.
That for God, that force is one and the same. And I trust God to figure that out. But if it's not justice, then it's not love.
Yeah, but that can be really hard.
Sure.
For somebody to swallow.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe that.
So, we haven't asked this question in our last 3 driver's seats. How do we talk to our kids about hell?
We wait until they start talking about it.
How are you going to talk to your kids about hell? And don't say they haven't started talking about it. I'm their children's pastor. They have.
The quickest thing, well, I would say, what do you want to know?
Yeah.
Or what do you already know?
Yeah.
I'd try to figure out what's coming at me right now, and the other 2 things that I've got in my pocket is, one, yes, I do believe in hell, but it might not be the hell that you imagine.
Yeah.
And the second is the church believes in hell, but we believe that it's not the place it used to be because of Jesus. And I would probably, if they really wanted to know more, I would probably show them an image of that icon.
Yeah.
Of Jesus being the one who goes to hell for us.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the picture that lives at the top of my faith about what we believe about hell.
Yeah.
What about you?
I think, I think the first question out of my mouth would be like, why do you want to know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Where's this coming from? Who told you about hell?
Right.
And they'll be like, Drew's kids.
They probably just been watching Looney Tunes. Like that's,
No, they wouldn't have. My husband made a Bugs Bunny reference in the car the other day, and my youngest was like, who's that? No, I think that, I don't know. Because there's the way that I was taught about hell, which is, this is something to be feared. Right. It's something you need to save your friends from. But then, I don't know.
Yeah.
I would definitely say it's let's look at the Bible.
I wouldn't mind keeping it open-minded, keeping it kind of open and saying something like, it's the place where sin and death go. Mm-hmm. But it's not necessarily the place where sinners and dead people go.
Right.
That even might be a little bit too complex, but I think that's what I've been trying to say for the last hour or so.
I think it's too, what am I going to say? What am I going to say when they get a hold of one of those tracks?
You're going to say, what do you think about it? And they're probably going to come up with something that's fine.
Yeah.
I think generally, like, part of what part of what we're saying is we don't necessarily want the way we form our children's faith to be primarily through scare tactics.
Right.
Because we think the gospel is better than that.
Well, and I think because it would be really easy for me to just go, well, hell's not real, and then just stop believing. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
if my entire faith is based on being scared of hell, I can, through the right kind of therapy and the right kind of self-talk, hell can just stop being scary.
Right.
And then at that point, my entire faith crumbles.
Right. But that implies a brittle faith. So I think...
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
Like
the discipline is noticing when you have that encounter with the coach.
Yeah.
And saying, okay, either there's nothing, or there's something, and it's just not what I thought it was.
Yeah.
And generally, that's been Drew's fun with theology throughout his life, is encountering something that makes me say, hold on a second. Either there's none of this, and if your faith is a Jenga tower or something incredibly brittle, the slightest thing will knock it all down.
Yeah.
If, however, your faith is more like a plant, that where like the inner buds of a flower have to break through the buds that are around them that have been protecting them in order for the flower to actually bloom, then that breaking is a breaking open to something different, to something fuller, to something more sustainable, to something more eternal. So I think when those kind of questions come up with our children or with ourselves, I think the hope that I'm trying to throw out in the world is that maybe the whole tower won't fall down. Maybe there's a full tower
Yeah.
that might look or feel similar, but is actually very sturdy.
Yeah.
Maybe the part that you thought was your eternal dwelling place was actually built on sand, and there's actually a different foundation that you can find.
Yeah.
I think like that's the hope that I keep on trying to throw out in the world, is the faith that we have inherited is there's more to it.
Yeah.
And yes, you can abandon it, but at some level that would be a choice, because I think there's more to learn about it. I mean, it's why when we do confirmation classes for like 6th through 8th graders, this church has always had a class at the same time for the parents. It's why we have Minivangelism and the driver's seat.
Yeah.
Because often, by the time somebody gets to the point of parenting, they've taken some kind of vacation from really exploring their faith. And the last version of a faith that they had, that they actively pursued, was a 4th, 5th, or 6th grade faith.
Yeah.
And that doesn't hold up once you've gone through adolescent development. But part of what I'm trying to say is the faith does.
Yeah.
That the Christian faith is more sophisticated and durable than whatever you stopped learning when you were in 6th grade. And all of these things that seem like hot button issues. Part of what I have fun doing is saying we have options beyond I believe in hell or I don't believe in hell. There's other options where I can believe in hell, but what I mean by hell is, or I believe Jesus is the only way to salvation, but what I mean by salvation is, we're the Christian faith has not lasted for 2 millennia in a brittle form.
Right.
It has undergone all kinds of rigorous speculation, and still has something to say.
Yeah.
And so when our kids show up with one of these questions, I think the hope I have is to just keep the conversation going.
Yeah.
One way or another, to not end the conversation in the cul-de-sac and say it's this or nothing, but to say some people say this, some people say this. Jesus says this, and that's the Jesus that I'm worshiping when we go to church together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or just why don't you come with mommy to work and we'll go ask Pastor Drew.
That's always welcome. But when parents do that, they're never usually satisfied with what. Because I didn't give their kid an answer. We just chatted and I gave them candy.
Oh my gosh.
We haven't stumped each other.
We're not doing that on this.
Oh, good. Phew.
I think we did, but in a way we did stump each other. We stumped each other and helped each other.
Yeah. Well, in closing, with your consent,
I consent.
I just want to mention part of our liturgy. Well, there's 2 last things. One really cool thing.
4 last things.
That's true. One cool thing is in the iconography of Christmas. Mm-hmm. You can put an icon of Jesus' birth in Bethlehem and an icon of Jesus' resurrection, and the shape and form of the icons are exactly the same. Except what happens in Jesus' birth is that it's not hell that Jesus is coming out of. It's the stable where Jesus is born. And so in the commentary of those images, part of what we understand happens at Christmas is that Jesus has come to be with us in the hell of this world, in order to redeem it. And I think that's the connection that is that comes up in the carols that I mentioned and stuff like that. That the radical gift of Christmas is life is hell, and Jesus has just shown up to be here with us. The last thing is we just did a funeral this week, and I don't love our United Methodist funeral liturgy. I think the Episcopalians probably do it better, but there are parts of it that I really love. One of them is it starts with the words of Jesus, who says, "I am the resurrection and the life." There's kind of this litany of things Jesus says. One of them is, "I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I hold the keys of hell and death. Because I live, you shall live also." And I used to hear those words as "I hold the keys of hell and death" as a threat. But now I hear "I hold the keys of hell and death. I've got the keys. Because I live and I've got the keys, you shall live also."
I love that.
Yeah. It's like the cosmic game of capture the flag. And Jesus is holding the flag and saying, "I won." And so let's go. What ultimately I think we can believe, even if it's a challenge to navigate, is that whatever hell is, it's one more place where Jesus has shown up and radically transformed it.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
So keep coming to church. It's awesome. This stuff is awesome. Yeah. So.
All right.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. La, 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 la. So if you are listening to this on the day it's released, we got 2 days till Christmas Eve. And you are welcome to join us.
Yes.
On Christmas Eve. If you are in the Manassas area, you are welcome to join us. We are Grace United Methodist Church. We are also streaming our 6 o'clock service.
Yes.
At umcgrace.org. So if you want to join us online, you are welcome to do that as well. If you have any questions about hell, or if you just want to give us some feedback on this episode,
or if you want to tell me to go to hell,
you are more than welcome to send us an email to minivangelism@gmail.com. I do check the emails, so if you want to tell Drew to go to hell, please send it, because I've been looking for an excuse to go to his office and say that. Don't forget, you can also follow us on Instagram. We are at Minivangelism, and we just hope that you, even though we're talking about hell, we do hope that you have a heavenly Christmas.
That's right.
And we look forward to seeing you guys in the new year. We will be coming out soon with some episodes, a mini-sode preview of what we've got coming up, but we just hope that you guys have a good Christmas, that you travel safe, and and thank you for joining us.
That's right.
With these 4 last things.
Thank you, Anna, for having the idea to
It was your idea. It was your idea.
Well, we'll debate about that off mic.
Okay. Well,
God bless you all.
I'm going to real hell now.
You are?
Yeah. The mall.
Yeah.
On December 20th.
God bless you, my friend.
All right, God rest you, merry gentlemen. All right, bye.
Cheers.
Minivangelism and the Driver's Seat are hosted by Anna Burrell and Drew Colby. Theme song written by David Burrell and produced by Evan Setzer. The theme song was performed by David Burrell, Drew Colby, and Evan Setzer. Podcast, sound design, and editing done by David Burrell. Minivangelism and the Driver's Seat are a ministry of Grace United Methodist Church in Manassas, Virginia. For more information, check out umcgrace.org.